The sun had nearly bowed out when Clara Belle stepped down from the stagecoach, her boots sinking slightly into the dust-swept main street of Dovetail Ridge. Evening wind coiled around her coat hem, teasing loose strands of her dark hair and fluttering the edge of her faded blue shawl. She held no luggage but a small leather satchel and a rolled-up blanket tied with fraying twine. She'd ridden through towns like this for years, quiet places that stared more than they spoke, where eyes followed you from porch rails and windows until you were gone again. She didn't plan to stay. The town itself looked worn but proud, wooden storefronts leaning slightly like old men with secrets, the church steeple chipped, yet still defiant against the sky. A blacksmith's hammer rang somewhere nearby, and a cluster of boys darted past her laughing, the dust rising behind them like smoke. No one greeted her, though a few nodded out of habit. Clara was used to that kind of welcome. At the boarding house, the matron squinted at her through thick spectacles. "One bed left," she said, tapping her ledger with a stubby pencil. "Attic room. Warm as a stovepipe come noon, drafty by dawn. Suits someone with no intentions of lingering." "That'll do," Clara replied. She paid in silver coins, the last of her tips from a mining town where the piano had been missing 2 keys and half its soul. She climbed the creaking stairs to a narrow attic with one small window and walls slanted like shoulders carrying too much grief. Dust motes floated in the last streaks of sun. Clara sat on the edge of the narrow bed and exhaled slowly. Later, she wandered down to the parlor, where a half-forgotten upright piano sat against the wall. The keys were chipped, some slightly out of tune. But when she touched them, the notes spilled soft and hesitant, like someone remembering how to speak. She played low, not to draw attention, but the melody slipped out, gentle, yearning. She closed her eyes, letting it take her back to things she'd left behind. Behind her, a chair scraped. "You one of those saloon girls?" Delia Rusk's voice sliced the music in two. Clara turned slowly. The older woman's mouth was a tight line. "We don't cater to that kind here." "I'm a pianist," Clara said evenly. "Only passing through." "Passing through's fine. Just keep your distance from the married men, miss." "Clara Belle." Delia sniffed. "You'll want to keep your head down in this town. Folks here remember what they see." Clara nodded and rose. The warmth of her song lingered in her chest like an echo, even as the door shut behind her. The next morning broke pale and cloudless. Clara had planned to leave. She checked the stagecoach schedule posted near the livery, delayed for repairs until next week. So she wandered, her steps slow, uncommitted, passing hitching posts and watering troughs and quiet storefronts. She passed a group of women outside the church, their conversation cutting off as she neared. Their smiles were thin. One whispered, and the others laughed behind gloved hands. She turned into the general store to escape their stares and browse the threads and tin buttons. Her fingers ran over a bolt of calico when she heard a small voice beside her. "You smell like violets." Clara looked down. A girl of about 6 stood barefoot on the wooden floor, a cotton dress smeared with dust and jam, wild curls tied back with a strip of muslin. Her eyes were bright, fearless. "That's just soap," Clara said, surprised into a smile. "I like it," the girl said matter-of-factly, then stuck out her hand. "I'm June." Clara shook it gently. "Nice to meet you, June." The little girl tilted her head. "Want to meet my daddy?" The question was so sudden, so direct, that Clara blinked. "I don't think your daddy wants strange women showing up on his porch." June shrugged. "He won't mind." "You're nice." Before Clara could answer, the girl had grabbed her hand and pulled her out of the store and down the dusty lane, past the edge of town where the road gave way to wheat fields and broken fences. Clara let herself be led, part amused, part intrigued. Something about the child's confidence was magnetic. They reached a small homestead set back beneath 2 cottonwoods. A weathered porch sagged at the edges. Tools leaned against the side wall, and the scent of wood smoke drifted from the chimney. A man stepped out onto the porch. He was tall, with sunburnt skin and a work-worn build. His hair was dark, jaw rough with stubble, and his eyes, a clear, watchful blue, narrowed as they landed on Clara. His posture was cautious, not unkind. "She's nice," June said brightly, releasing Clara's hand and bounding up the steps. "She plays music. Like Mama used to." The man's face barely changed, but Clara saw the flicker behind his eyes. Grief, perhaps. Or memory. "I'm Eli McCrae," he said slowly. "June's father. Clara Bell." He nodded once. "You lost?" "No," she said softly. "Just passing through." He looked at her a long moment, then stepped aside. "Supper's just about ready." Clara hesitated. Everything in her said not to impose. But something else, something deeper, nudged her forward. She followed June into the small, clean kitchen. The table was set simply: cornbread, beans, roasted carrots. June climbed into a chair, swinging her legs. Eli served food in silence. They ate with quiet respect. The only sounds were cutlery and the ticking of the wall clock. June spoke now and then, about a bird she saw, about the name she'd picked for her ragdoll. Clara listened. Eli listened more. After the dishes were cleared, Clara stood to leave. "Thank you," she said, "for supper." Eli nodded. "You're welcome to come by again. If June allows it." Clara smiled. "That's a mighty big responsibility for such small shoulders." June grinned, cheeks full of jam. As Clara turned to go, her fingers brushed Eli's when he handed her the shawl she'd left on the hook. They both pulled back quickly, startled. It was only a touch, but it hummed through her skin like the low note of a song waiting to begin. Back in her attic room, Clara sat by the window and watched the stars appear. Her satchel lay untouched on the floor. She reached inside and pulled out a small photograph, faded at the edges, creased down the center. It showed a young woman holding a baby boy, swaddled in linen. Her smile in the picture was different. Open. Oh. Clara stared at it for a long time, then tucked it away and picked up the folded piece of paper beside it. She hesitated, then placed it gently into the drawer and closed it. The next day, she found herself walking toward the McCrae homestead without really deciding to. June ran to meet her at the gate, arms open. And for the first time in a long while, Clara Bell didn't feel like she was just passing through. Clara returned each morning like the dawn, quiet, unannounced, and always welcome by at least one heart. June waited for her barefoot by the fence post, holding wildflowers in her small fists, beaming as if joy were something she could hand over. Clara brought small things in return: a basket of biscuits, a spool of green thread, once even a dulcimer with a crack in the wood that Eli quietly repaired without a word. She never asked to stay, and Eli never asked why she came. But as days lengthened into something that looked suspiciously like belonging, neither found reason to stop her. Clara often found Eli working in the fields, his silhouette bending and straightening under the weight of stubborn soil. He moved with deliberate silence, but his glances grew longer, softer. He'd nod when she approached, sometimes offer water, sometimes a slice of apple. Their conversations were made mostly of silences filled with meaning, of hands brushing in the handoff of tools or plates, of eyes meeting across the yard and holding just a second longer than necessary. It was not courtship. It was something older, something quieter. A slow recognition. In the evenings, Clara played for June. Simple tunes, lullabies, hymns long forgotten in church pews. June sang along in her crooked, joyful voice, swaying her rag doll to the beat. Eli often sat just outside the door, listening but never intruding, whittling figures from soft pine or running his thumb along the edge of a worn photograph he kept folded in his shirt pocket. He never showed it, but Clara understood. The town had not failed to notice Clara's steady presence. In places like Dovetail Ridge, routine bred scrutiny. Delia Rusk, who'd once only narrowed her eyes, now sniffed and folded her arms when Clara passed. "It ain't decent," she told the grocer loudly one morning. "Widower or no, the McCraes don't need some piano woman playing house like she's earned it." The words found their way to other porches, other mouths, until Clara's steps in town echoed differently. The space around her widened, like oil on water. She tried to shake it off. But shame had a long memory. One evening, as she approached the homestead with a freshly mended bonnet for June, a voice called out from the saloon porch. "Hey, songbird," a man slurred, tipping his hat with mockery. "Play us something like you did for that fancy widow last year. Or did you wear out your welcome there too?" She froze. The bonnet slipped from her fingers. The men laughed. Clara didn't speak. She turned, walked back into the growing dusk, her hands clenched, her breath shallow. That night she packed. She folded the blanket, tied the satchel, and set the folded photograph inside with trembling fingers. But before dawn touched the horizon, a knock echoed against her attic door. June stood there, eyes sleepy but determined, holding the bonnet Clara had dropped. "You forgot this." Clara knelt, brushing the girl's curls behind her ear. "Sweetheart," she whispered, "I think it's time I move on." "No," June said, fierce. "Daddy don't smile unless you're here. He watches you like he used to watch Mama when she sang to me. He just don't know how to say things." Clara's throat tightened. She pressed a kiss to the girl's forehead, whispered, "Go home, June." June didn't cry. She just nodded solemnly and walked away, dragging her doll behind her. But Clara didn't leave. She sat by the window all night, staring at the horizon, trying to remember what safety had ever felt like, and why this time it scared her more than loneliness ever had. The next evening brought the barn gathering. A twice-yearly tradition: music, stew, dancing under lanterns hung from beams like stars. Clara went, unsure why. Maybe to say goodbye properly. Maybe to see if her hands still remembered joy. She stood at the edge of the room, watching as couples spun across the floor, the air thick with laughter and fiddle music. She clutched a tin cup of cider, invisible again, just another shadow on the wall. Then the fiddle snapped a string mid-song. The room paused. Whispers fluttered. The players murmured among themselves. The music halted like a heart skipping a beat. And then June's voice rang out. "She can play." Clara froze. All eyes turned. Some expectant. Some skeptical. Delia smirked from across the room. Clara's legs felt rooted. Her fingers curled around the cup, white-knuckled. Then Eli stepped forward. His voice was low but steady. "If you want to," he said. "Only if you want to." He didn't reach for her. He didn't lead. He simply stood beside her, a stillness in the storm. Clara walked to the piano. It was dusty, unused. The bench creaked beneath her weight. She placed her hands on the keys, familiar, foreign. She closed her eyes. The first note wavered. The second found footing. By the fifth, the barn had grown silent. Even the lantern flames seemed to lean in. She played not for the crowd, not even for June or Eli, but for the girl she once was. The one who had sung to a baby with fevered cheeks, who'd left everything behind because staying had felt like drowning. The music climbed slowly, wrapped itself around rafters, poured from her chest like water from a broken dam. When she finished, she didn't look up. But she heard it, the sound of hands clapping. At first one pair. Then another. Then the entire room, like a heartbeat thundering back to life. Eli walked to her. He didn't speak. He didn't smile wide. But he extended his hand. And this time, Clara took it. Later that week, the stagecoach rolled in. It waited by the livery until midday, then rattled off down the trail without her. Clara stayed. She helped June plant seeds behind the house. She cooked while Eli mended fences. She played music each evening as dusk painted the porch in gold. She never said she was staying. He never asked. But every night, when the stars came out, Eli left a chair open beside him, and Clara always found her way to it. She had once believed she'd been built for moving, for disappearing between towns and stories. But a little girl had taken her hand, and a quiet man had waited without words, and somewhere in that waiting, Clara had remembered she was not made to be forgotten. And even now, if you ride through Dovetail Ridge, you might hear music drifting from the edge of town, soft, steady, sure. Because sometimes you're not just passing through. Sometimes you're being called home.